Do the Louisville Cardinals need to go on a run for the remainder of February? We'll answer that question and many more on today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what is going on, everyone? Welcome into this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my fifth year covering the University of Louisville, third year hosting this show. And I want to take the time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the show is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Now, today's episode of the show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. I got so many good questions for this week's mailbag. A lot of these questions related to and pertain to what the Louisville Cardinals are going through at the moment, both on the basketball and football side. So I was like, you know what? We'll dedicate an entire show to answering mailbag questions. 2 questions each segment for a total of 6. We'll discuss Louisville in the month of February, how much success the Cardinals need to have, Chucky Hepburn and his success levels, him being left off of a pretty notable watch list recently, and Deion Branch being hired as the Louisville football wide receivers coach. So a lot of good questions that we will answer today. We begin on the basketball side of things. First question, what frustrates me most about Louisville's loss to Georgia Tech isn't so much that they lost to a team that wasn't as good as them, but it was the timing of the loss in the early part of February. Does Louisville need to go on a run for the remainder of the month? Really good question. Appreciate the question. I think that the short answer is yes here, because it goes back to the discussion that we had basically last week, saying that the Cardinals have a great opportunity in the month of February to bolster their resume by picking up wins against teams that aren't as good as them. It was pretty clear that the quality of team that they played in January, that took a little bit of a hit going into February. You're playing some of the bottom teams in the ACC. Now, the other side to that discussion is that if you lose against these teams, those results will have a direct impact and a larger impact on your net ranking, on your tournament chances, on your tournament seeding, AP ranking, etc. And you saw the loss to Georgia Tech took the Cardinals down about 5 spots in the net. It's not terrible, but Louisville went from being projected as a 5 seed in most bracketology predictions to now a 7 seed, maybe even an 8 seed, depending on which site you are looking at. Now, that those bracketology predictions aren't always accurate. Louisville not falling a ton in the net is more significant than the bracketology predictions, but I think that this question highlights the need for another run because your tournament resume depends on it. Because the ACC's perception is down, because the teams that you're playing aren't as good as what other teams will be playing. Like, this is a really bad month. A really bad month in terms of the opponents that you're playing in the net rankings. Like, I'm looking at the net rankings. Louisville will play Boston College, who's 217, Miami, who's 227. They'll play NC State, who's 115. Let's see, Virginia Tech is 160. Florida State is 88. Notre Dame is 93. You don't have a game left in the month of February against a team that is ranked better than 88th. So, yes, you have a chance to build wins. You have a chance to stack wins together. But it can also hurt you if you lose a game. So you need to go on a run for that concept alone. You eliminate bad losses because those losses are going to hurt you more than a team that loses in the SEC or the Big 12 because those teams are ranked higher in the net rankings. So For starters, the answer is yes because of that. Also, you look at the ACC pecking order at the moment, and the Cardinals are ranked third in the conference behind Duke and Clemson. They have a 1-game lead over SMU and Wake Forest, a 2-game lead over Stanford. So if you are trying to get closer and closer to locking up a top 4 seed in the conference and getting that double bye for the conference tournament, then of course you have to go on a little bit of a run here, because not only can you solidify a top 4 finish, but now I say this as it being possible, not probable. Duke at the moment has not lost a single conference game. They're 11-0. They've had some close games, but I would imagine that they're going to finish number 1. Clemson, you have the tiebreaker against the Tigers, and you look at who they have to play. They play Duke this weekend. They still have to play North Carolina and at SMU, and they have to play Florida State on the road. So you have an easier schedule than the Tigers. This is a chance to be able to not only secure a top 4 seed in conference play, but rise up to that number 2 spot once again and be a top 2 team in the conference. So the net ranking, your tournament hopes, also tournament seeding, you would much rather try to continue to build that resume and get to that 5 to 6 range than be an 8 or a 9 seed, or, knock on wood, maybe you go on a little bit of a skid and you get a 12 seed. I don't even want to think about being back on the bubble. But the reality of the situation is that if you don't go on a run for the remainder of February, I'm not saying you have to win every single game, although that would be really advantageous. If you don't go on a run, you could find yourself back on the bubble, because it's clear that the committee, the net rankings, and bracketology reports don't emphasize ACC results. So the answer to that question is yes, I do think that they need to go on a run. Second question is, what is Louisville's record in the month of February following the Georgia Tech loss? So there are 6 games remaining for the Cardinals. We talked about the opponents that they will play. For a refresher, they're at Boston College tomorrow, Miami over the weekend at home, at NC State, at Notre Dame versus Florida State, and at Virginia Tech to round out the month. Louisville can definitely go 6-0 the rest of the way. Can and will are 2 different discussions. Will Louisville go 6-0? I want to say yes, but there's a couple of these games, like I know Notre Dame just lost to Miami, but the Cardinals always are challenged by the Irish up in South Bend. For whatever reason, sort of like Atlanta playing Georgia Tech, the Cardinals just historically don't play the greatest when they're playing Notre Dame on the road. So that one worries me a little bit. NC State should be a team that you beat, but they have, stayed competitive with Duke and Clemson. I'm going to say 5-1. I really want to say 6-0. I don't think that you're going to lose more than 1 game. At least I hope not. If you do, then you could find yourself into trouble. But I don't know where that loss comes from. I do think that Louisville could go undefeated for the rest of the month. But I also said that before the weekend, when the Louisville lost to a Georgia Tech team that they started out being favored against by 7.5, and that line got up closer to 9.5 and 10.5. Louisville just got bullied by Georgia Tech. The Yellow Jackets were more physical. The Cardinals just didn't play a good game. Now, they weren't. I don't look at this as like a trend waiting to happen. I don't even compare the end of the Wake Forest game to the Georgia Tech game, because the Cardinals were up by, almost 30 points. It's hard to stay engaged and keep your foot on the gas when you're playing against a team and you're up by over 20 points for the majority of the game. So do I think that Louisville's going to bounce back? I do. I do think that they're going to bounce back. But the question is, do I think that they're going to bounce back to the tune of winning the next 6 games? Like I said, I go back and forth. I took the easy way out before the month and said that I thought that Louisville was going to lose less than one game. And technically, we're right here. They've only lost one game. And if you're looking to go on a run, this is the part of the schedule in which you'd want to do it. So I'm going to say 5-1. But really, 6-0 doesn't sound too far off. I think that 6-0 is of course possible. Do I go as far as saying that it's probable? Probably not, but there's a really good chance, I feel like. And the two games that are going to decide that for me, actually, I'm going to go with three. I think that at NC State, at Notre Dame, and Florida State at home. Florida State's a weird team, but I feel like they match up well for the against the Cardinals. And if Louisville doesn't shoot the ball well against Florida State, I could see that game really being a tough one for Pat Kelsey's team. So I'm going to say 5-1, but 6-0 definitely is on the table. So when we come back, it's all about Chucky Hepburn. Two really interesting questions involving the Cardinals star point guard. We'll answer them when we come back on this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Looking for tickets to your next big event? Whether it's a concert, a comedy show, or a sports game, finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache. But with Gametime Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. Gametime Picks, the app, does all the hard work for you. It creates the best deals, so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. I just got my tickets for the upcoming game against Miami for the Louisville Cardinals on Saturday. Have used Gametime all throughout the year. With the panoramic views from your seats, no surprise fees at checkout. Gametime is where you need to go. And you have the lowest price guarantee, meaning that if you find a better deal elsewhere, they'll refund you 110% of the difference. Ready to make your next event even better? Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. That's with the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Chucky Hepburn's impact on this Louisville team is one that I don't think you can really measure because it spans so much further than the box score. He is the heart and soul of this team, and that leads me into two really good questions that you all have proposed. And first one is, Chucky Hepburn was snubbed off of the Bob Cousy Award watch list. My question to you, Dalton, are there more than 5 point guards that you'd take over Chucky Hepburn to be the point guard for this year's Louisville Cardinals team? So a little bit of a backstory. The Bob Cousy Award is the award given to the best point guard in the nation. And it is the point guard equivalent to the Jerry West Award for the shooting guard, Julius Erving for small forward, Karl Malone for power forward, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for the center. The top 10 was just released. Chucky Hepburn did not make that list, which is where I believe that this question is spanning from. So I'm going to sort of use that list as a reference. The 10 that made it: Alabama's Mark Sears, Florida's Walter Clayton Jr., Gonzaga's Ryan Nembhard, Iowa State's Keyshawn Gilbert, Marquette's Cam Jones, Penn State's Ace Baldwin, Purdue's Braden Smith, Rutgers' Dylan Harper, Tennessee's Zakai Ziegler, and West Virginia's Javon Small. I think that his impact is incredible. The way that he's able to help this team offensively and defensively, the workload and the responsibility that he has to shoulder every single game for Louisville to win games, I think it's incredible. Are there more than 5 point guards that you would take over Chucky Hepburn? I guess I'm going to use this list to decide that. I'm going to say, well, let's go down the list. Would you take Mark Sears over Chucky Hepburn? I would. Mark Sears is one of the best players in the country. First of all, I'll tell you who I wouldn't take: Ryan Nembhard, Keyshawn Gilbert, Ace Baldwin. That's 3 right off the bat. So now you have a couple of other players. Would you take Walter Clayton Jr.? I think he's doing a really good job at Florida, but I think that the defense of Chucky Hepburn and the way that he leads this team, I would go with Chucky over Walter Clayton, which SEC fans would be like, whoa, 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 what are you doing? Just my opinion. I know that I'm biased. I would take Braden Smith. He's really, really, really good point guard for Purdue. I would take Cam Jones from Marquette, Mark Sears from Alabama. Would I take Javon Small from West Virginia? Potentially. Would I take Dylan Harper? For this Louisville team? Probably not, because of Hepburn's ability to just be such a good point of attack defender, his veteran leadership. And that's not to say that Dylan Harper is not a good player, because he's great and he's likely going to be a top 3 draft pick in the NBA. But I just feel like he fits this team really, really well. So for this Louisville team, I'm not sure that I would take Dylan Harper, despite him being really good. Would I take Zakai Ziegler over Chucky Hepburn? I would say no there as well. Hepburn is Louisville's go-to scoring option. Can Ziegler be able to be that guy for Tennessee? Well, he's really never had to be that guy, so I'm not sure that he would. So the question is, would you take more than 5? No, I would not. I would not take more than 5 point guards on this list over Chucky Hepburn. And people say, well, this guy's definitely better than Hepburn. It's sort of one of those things that I watch a unhealthy amount of college basketball. Like, that is my favorite sport. I am a huge college basketball fanatic. And it doesn't just span to, it doesn't just, directly relate to Louisville. Like, I watch a lot of college basketball. Almost every day, at least a game a day. And I've watched all of these other players play more than one game. And I think that there are some players that I would rather have, because that's no disrespect to Chucky. It's just that these are like potential National Player of the Year candidates. Cam Jones has been incredible for Marquette. Mark Sears is incredible and tournament proven. Braden Smith is really good, but Chucky Hepburn is also fantastic, to the point to where, number 1, he should have made this list, and number 2, he might be top 5, and that's saying a ton. Like, he's been great, and it's not just the box score, because he's doing it in terms of scoring. He leads the team in scoring, he leads the team in assists, he leads the team in steals. I mean, and he's doing it at 42% shooting, 33% from the three-point line, and 84% from the free throw line, despite being like the go-to guy. He's averaging 34.1 minutes a game. He's barely getting subbed out. When he gets subbed out, it's right before the TV timeout, to where he has a little bit of an extra break. Not many other players in the country are being tasked with carrying the workload that Chucky is, and being able to succeed at the level that Chucky is. So, 4th question, is Louisville's success tied directly to Chucky Hepburn? Do the Cardinals need him to play good to have a chance to win each game? I mean, kind of goes without saying that you need your best player to play well to have a increased chance at winning a game. I think that the question is sort of the intent, at least, I feel like from my perception, is like, does Chucky have to play good for Louisville to win? And we've seen that when he's not on the court, the offensive, the flow of the offense takes a hit. Defensively, they're able to mask over the loss of Hepburn, because they have some really good defenders on the team. But offensively, this is where the lack of another true point guard comes into play. Like, Terrence Edwards can be that lead offensive initiator, but he's definitely better suited as sort of that secondary ball handler, that slasher type role. And when he's being forced to be the point guard, you can just see there's a little bit of a drop off when Chucky Hepburn leaves the court. And that's no disrespect to anyone else on the team. It's just a matter of respecting how good Chucky has been. So, I mean, if Chucky, I mean, there's been games where he hasn't shot the ball well, but the effort and the intensity and almost every other aspect that he has played with is still high. Louisville has won games. So I would argue that scoring, he doesn't have to necessarily score 15 every night, but he does have to be that facilitator. He does have to be that high energy guy on defense, that menace against the other team's point guard, and has to be a player that limits turnovers despite his high usage. So, question's a little bit tricky to answer, but that would be my sort of perception on the matter. So, yes and no. Some great football questions regarding the 2026 class and Deion Branch coming up when we return on this final segment of the Tuesday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Cardinal fans, want to take the time again to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the show is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. On tomorrow's episode, we're going to preview the week ahead for Louisville basketball, Boston College and Miami on the docket for the Cardinals to play. We will do a little bit of a deeper dive into the issues that Boston College has had, how they can be a pesky team, and Louisville needs to play up to their strength, but they still haven't had a really good season. So a lot of basketball talk on the show tomorrow. But we conclude this episode of the show and the episode-long mailbag. And thank you all for asking these questions in the mailbag. This has been one of the best mailbags that we've had. Will high school recruiting be emphasized more by the coaching staff in the 2026 recruiting class? Really good question. It's one of those things that also we have to wonder, how's revenue sharing going to affect things? Like what or how large of an impact is it going to affect the willingness to recruit the high school ranks better, or just continue to go very portal heavy? And I think that the market asking prices across the country are continuing to rise. Like the market in the portal is inflated, and it's going to continue to rise and rise until basically either a cap is put on it, which it doesn't sound like that's likely anytime soon, or teams are just like, yeah, that was the limit of what we're going to pay. So the 2025 class was ranked pretty low. Louisville obviously made a ton of emphasis, or put a ton of emphasis on the portal class. Louisville had the 58th best class according to 24/7 Sports, 71st according to the composite. So it really not a great class, although I think that of the 11 guys that signed, I do think that Louisville has some players that could end up playing a good amount at the Louisville. Currently, they have 6 players. They got their quarterback of the class just recently, Briggs Cherry, 4-star on Rivals now. I like the commitment of Amani Smith, defensive player from Galway, Ohio, outside of Columbus, Westland High School. I really like that commitment. Then you've got some other players, Brady Ballard, Max Mers, some players from around the area, and then John Adams from Florida. So you have 6 players. I think that there will be a little bit of an added emphasis. I do still feel that Jeff Brom and company are going to emphasize the portal. He did say that every class is going to be different, but really we're continuing to see a trend of more and more portal players being taken and less high school players. So there are 6 players committed as of early February. I think the days of taking 25 players in a class for the Cardinals is over, but I do think that 18 to 19 players is still realistic, and I would really like to see Louisville recruit the high school ranks more intentionally. Go after some more 4-star level guys, because we're starting to see that being able to bring in a 4-star level player, now the drawback is that you don't know in terms of production because there's a lack of proven production. but the cost of getting a 4-star player in the high school ranks versus a transfer at that position could be pretty significantly different. So it's just a matter of, well, how are things going to be affected by revenue sharing? Louisville is one of those teams that's going to pour a good amount of money into basketball because Louisville's a basketball school, but football makes the most money. So obviously, football is going to get the majority of it. And I think that that's kind of where you're looking at, okay, maybe going to the high school ranks and budgeting the money that we have and bringing in some highly talented high school players that are getting overlooked because the top schools are going to the portal. I think that that could be a pretty solid avenue of success. But the question is, will they emphasize high school recruiting more in the 2026 class? I think so, but I do think it could be marginal. I don't think that Louisville takes over 20 players in the 2026 class. So Deion Branch was just hired as the wide receivers coach for Louisville this morning. Thoughts on the Cardinals not making an external hire? And do you feel like this is a lazy move by Jeff Brom? Shout out to this question because it was asked like right before I decided to start recording. And I was like, I guess I can throw this in there because it is significant news. Deion Branch, it felt like a really bad kept secret. He was promoted to wide receivers coach, was the director of player development for the last 2 seasons under Jeff Brom, but he was out recruiting with the staff recently. So you would imagine that the writing was on the wall that he was going to join the staff as a wide receivers coach, replacing Garrick McGee, who ended up joining Bill Belichick's staff in Chapel Hill at North Carolina. And number one, I don't think it's a lazy hire because he's a Super Bowl champion at the position. He played at Louisville, and he was a really good wide receiver. How do I feel about it not being an external hire? Maybe different if this was like offensive or defensive coordinator, but wide receivers coach, I'm not really going to worry about that, especially since Deion knows the system that Brom runs. Really good wide receiver, is looking to get into coaching, Super Bowl MVP. And there was the rebuttal that, well, players won't remember Deion Branch's playing days. Yeah, but their parents will. And that's a huge aspect, is being able to create that relationship with the recruits' parents. So say, hey, look, I was a Super Bowl MVP, really good player at Louisville. We can get your son to the NFL and have a ton of success. So, I mean, it's one of those moves to where I don't think it's like jump off the page excellent, because hiring a wide receivers coach, as long as Deion Branch is allowed to recruit the high school ranks, like if the staff initiative is to put more emphasis into recruiting the high school ranks, I think that would be advantageous for Deion Branch. But I don't think that this is one of those like, dude, why will we hire this guy? Like, I don't think it's, regardless of who they would have hired, I don't think it would have been like insanely good or insanely bad, because Louisville's offense is pretty set in terms of the offensive coaching, and I trust Jeff Brom to make the right decisions on that side of the football. So a lot of great questions. Thank you all for asking them. When we come back tomorrow, it's all about Boston College preview, looking ahead to the week that Louisville will play this week, or the week's games that Louisville will play, I should rephrase. Boston College and Miami. Great week to get back on track and bounce back. We'll see you then. Until next time, you're tuned into the Locked On Louisville podcast. Everyone have a great day.